King Charles did not raise his voice. He did not summon the cameras, issue a public warning, or give his younger son one final opportunity to retreat. Instead, the monarch placed his pen against a single page and signed a royal decree powerful enough to silence Prince Harry's remaining claim to speak through the crown. Within minutes, Harry's planned statement was stopped, palace communication lines were closed, and Meghan was left staring at a decision she never believed Charles would make. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had confirmation that Harry was preparing a televised address about ties with the monarchy. The speech sounded personal, yet its language suggested something dangerous. It implied that the Duke held authority to negotiate through the royal family. The Royal Decree of Crown Representation, a formal order defining who could speak in the Crown's name, was designed to end that confusion. The king had tolerated criticism, appeals, interviews, and efforts to reshape the Sussex position. This time was different. Harry planned to present his demands publicly before his father could answer privately, turning emotion into pressure. Charles knew palace silence could be mistaken for consent. Charles signed the final page privately and placed the pen beside it. He looked at the senior courtier. "My son may speak for himself," he said. "He will no longer speak through this crown." The order barred Harry from issuing statements, entering agreements, leading campaigns, or using titles, symbols, correspondence, and family connections to suggest royal approval. Harry received the decree minutes before recording his address. An advisor removed his phone, the studio connection disappeared, and his introduction became useless. He stood frozen. His father had acted first. The prince had lost control of the moment he believed would force the monarchy to listen. Meghan insisted the interruption had to be temporary. Then she reached the final paragraph. The order blocked commercial projects from using their royal connection as implied support. Her confidence vanished. She read the clause again and said nothing. The decree went further. Palace departments, royal residences, charitable offices, and legal representatives were ordered to stop recognizing Harry as an informal royal intermediary. A sealed enforcement clause would activate if he challenged the order publicly. Only Charles, William, and one constitutional advisor knew what it contained. Harry's anger was. Yet Meghan noticed worse. The decree had been prepared before the broadcast. Someone close to them had warned the palace. But before Harry could choose obedience or defiance, 4 lives were about to be pulled into the cost of the king's decision. Behind the language of royal authority stood a wounded father, an enraged son, a stunned wife, and a future king who understood that one signature could divide the family permanently. Charles saw the decree as protection. Harry saw it as humiliation. Meghan recognized it as an attack on everything they had built since leaving royal life. William, caught between duty and blood, knew the decision would drag every hidden resentment into the open. Charles carried 2 identities that could no longer exist peacefully. As a father, he remembered Harry as the grieving boy who once followed him through palace corridors, searching for safety after loss. As sovereign, he believed allowing his son to borrow royal authority threatened the stability of the institution. The sovereign was the reigning monarch with the constitutional responsibility to protect the crown's public authority, even when that duty caused private pain. The king remained alone after signing the decree. He lifted a framed photograph of William and Harry as boys and studied their faces for several silent seconds. Then he turned the picture face down before the next meeting began. The gesture revealed what he could not admit aloud. He had protected the monarchy, but he feared he had just wounded his family beyond repair. Charles had spent years hoping patience might rebuild trust. Now patience felt like permission for the same crisis to return. Harry paced across the room, while Meghan held the decree in both hands. He told her his father had not simply cancelled a speech. The monarch had erased his place in the family without hearing the final proposal. The Duke's anger came from more than the lost broadcast. A Duke was a high-ranking royal title, but for him, it had also become the foundation of a new public identity built outside official palace life. Harry still believed his experience gave him a unique voice and influence that no decree could remove. Meghan did not answer immediately. She reread the clauses blocking future productions, charitable negotiations, and campaigns from suggesting royal approval. Her shock deepened when she noticed several restrictions matched phrases used only in an unpublished draft of the address. The wording was too precise to be accidental. Someone had either shared the speech or described its private strategy to the palace. She looked at her husband and quietly asked who had seen the document. Harry stopped pacing. For the first time, anger gave way to suspicion. William felt no victory when the message arrived, summoning him to an emergency meeting with Charles. The future king believed the order was necessary, yet he knew his brother would treat his silence as proof of betrayal. The prince read the instruction twice. He must personally explain the decree before it became public. His father was placing the family's most dangerous conversation in his hands. Harry then found the date printed on the first internal draft. The order had been commissioned 3 weeks earlier, immediately after a private royal ceremony. That date pulled him back toward one explosive encounter, the moment Charles decided patience was no longer protecting the family, but endangering it. The decree did not begin with a lawyer, a television interview, or another public accusation. It began 3 weeks earlier inside St. George's Hall, during a private ceremony intended to unite the royal family around a new national initiative. Harry had been invited as a son, not as a working representative of the crown. Yet one unexpected conversation, overheard near the end of the evening, convinced Charles that his younger son was preparing to turn private access into public leverage. Charles had offered the invitation under strict conditions. There would be no recording, no media briefing, and no suggestion that Harry was returning to official duties. St. George's Hall was a grand ceremonial space, used for major royal gatherings. But this event had been kept private, to protect a new mental health initiative from becoming another family spectacle. The king wanted cooperation without confusion. He believed his son understood that line. Harry saw something else. His presence felt like proof that the monarchy still needed his experience, his public reach, and his connection with younger audiences. The Duke began to believe reconciliation could create a new role, one that gave him royal influence without forcing him back into full-time service. That belief hardened quietly throughout the evening. Charles heard the promise near a half-closed library door. Harry was speaking to a representative from an international foundation, assuring him that he could secure the king's support for a joint global campaign. The words sounded settled, almost official. Yet no approval had been requested, and no authority had been given. The monarch stepped forward and asked his son to repeat what he had just promised. Silence struck the room. Harry lowered his glass. The foundation representative offered a brief apology and left, understanding at once that he had entered something far more dangerous than a simple misunderstanding. Harry insisted he had only been opening a door for cooperation. Charles answered that family access was not royal authority. The crown, the institution representing the sovereign's official power, could not be privately borrowed whenever it strengthened a negotiation. The warning was calm, but its meaning was brutal. Meghan entered after hearing raised voices. She argued that the palace had used her husband's name when it suited the monarchy, while denying him respect when he asked for influence. The king refused to bend. He told her popularity was not the issue. The danger came from treating blood as permission to exercise public power. Charles received worse news the next morning. Palace officials had obtained a draft partnership announcement describing Harry as a royal representative backed by the monarch. The Lord Chamberlain's office, the department overseeing official palace operations and ceremonial conduct, was ordered to prepare a permanent separation between Harry's personal identity and crown representation. William learned of the incident that same day and offered no defense. When the prince finally entered the room to deliver the king's decision, Harry no longer wanted an explanation. He wanted to know which brother had betrayed the other first. There were no aides, cameras, or carefully prepared palace statements when William faced Harry. Only two brothers stood across from one another with the king's decree between them. Harry wanted a name. William wanted him to understand the danger he had created. But as old wounds rose to the surface, the dispute stopped being about royal language. It became a brutal reckoning over loyalty, abandonment, and which brother had truly broken the family. William met him inside a private sitting room at Clarence's house before the order became public. The residence was one of the king's official London homes, but that morning it felt less like a royal building and more like a closed chamber for family judgment. Charles stayed away on purpose. He hoped his sons might speak more honestly, without the monarch's presence controlling every word. The prince carried the signed decree and the unpublished partnership announcement from the ceremony. Harry arrived convinced his brother had helped design the punishment. Suspicion had already hardened into anger before either man spoke. William placed the draft on the table and asked why it promised the king's backing. Harry shoved the page away, stood, and demanded to know who had given the palace access to his private plans. His voice rose. He accused his elder brother of waiting for the perfect moment to remove him completely. Harry struck deeper. He claimed William had always feared his public influence, believing it might challenge the future king's authority. The accusation landed hard because it reached beyond the decree. It touched every rivalry, every comparison, and every wound the brothers had carried since childhood. William answered with quiet fury. He said the danger was not popularity. The danger was Harry's refusal to understand the difference between being the king's son and possessing the king's permission. A hybrid royal role meant trying to keep selected privileges of official duty while living outside its full rules, and the palace had already rejected that path. Harry finally admitted the truth. He had planned the broadcast to pressure Charles into approving that arrangement. Once the proposal was announced worldwide, he believed public sympathy would make refusal look cruel. He had not merely prepared a speech, he had prepared a trap. William then revealed how the plan had been exposed. The International Foundation had contacted the royal household directly to verify Harry's claimed authority, fearing it was being pulled into a constitutional dispute. Phrases from the private draft appeared inside that written request. No spy had stolen the speech. Harry's own promise had betrayed him. The Duke fell silent, but only briefly. He asked about the sealed enforcement clause. William avoided the question, and that hesitation told him enough. The prince paused at the door before leaving. He said he still loved Harry as a brother, but he would never allow that love to become a path around the king. Harry warned that if Charles activated the clause, he would challenge the decree before the world. Yet public resistance would not be enough, because the power behind the decision had already moved far beyond one father's anger. The signature belonged to Charles, but the decision carried the weight of the entire monarchy. Behind closed doors, constitutional advisors, palace officials, and Prince William had confronted a question no modern royal household had faced in quite this form. Could a prince who had stepped away from duty continue using royal identity as a private source of influence? The answer would determine more than Harry's future. It would define who controlled the meaning of the crown itself. Charles understood that the decree was meant to draw a boundary, not erase a son. The royal decree of crown representation was a formal order defining who could speak or act with the sovereign's authority. Harry would remain part of the family, but he could no longer negotiate, campaign, promise support, or build partnerships in a way that suggested the monarchy stood behind him. That distinction mattered, because every unclear promise placed the palace in a trap. Accept an unwanted commitment, or publicly reject the king's own child. William supported the order because ambiguity had become dangerous. The prince had watched private exceptions turn into public expectations again and again. Each concession taught Harry that another emotional appeal, another interview, or another wave of pressure might move the line. The future king believed the monarchy could not survive if its authority changed according to family conflict. Charles listened as advisors discussed titles, seals, charitable registrations, and communication restrictions. Their language became colder with every sentence. Then the king interrupted them. "Do not speak as though he is only a problem," he said. "He is still my child." His voice remained steady, but the room fell silent. The monarch demanded an order strong enough to protect the institution, without humiliating Harry. His advisors warned that softer language would create loopholes, and those openings would eventually be used. William agreed. He told his father that years of private exceptions had convinced his brother that every boundary could be negotiated through emotion or public pressure. Charles then opened the red box and removed the sealed enforcement clause. A red box was the secure case used to carry confidential royal papers. The hidden condition was brutal. If Harry knowingly defied the decree, the palace would stop recognizing his dukedom in official communication and ask Parliament to begin the formal process of removing the title. Parliament was the national lawmaking body whose involvement would be required for such a step. The order went further. Harry would lose access to private royal briefing channels, meaning he would no longer receive early notice of family announcements, ceremonies, security decisions, or official responses. Charles held the clause for several seconds. His hand hesitated. William spoke quietly. "If we do not mean it, he will know." The king signed. Within the hour, the decree reached legal teams, media partners, and charitable offices. One organization immediately withdrew from an agreement, using Sussex royal branding. The monarchy had drawn its line, and the consequences reached Harry and Meghan before either could decide whether to cross it. For years, Meghan had believed distance from the palace created freedom. The Sussexes could speak in their own voice, build global partnerships, and shape their identity beyond royal protocol. The decree changed that calculation in a single morning. Calls stopped being returned. A major agreement was placed under review. Invitations were quietly withdrawn. Then Meghan opened one final message and realized Charles had not merely silenced Harry's broadcast. He had severed the royal thread holding their entire public strategy together. Meghan watched one message after another appear on her laptop. The decree had been distributed privately before any public palace announcement, giving organizations time to protect themselves. Each was told that Harry and his wife could continue working independently, but they could not suggest support, cooperation, or future backing from the crown. That distinction mattered, because many partnerships had been strengthened by the belief that the couple still possessed private access to royal power. The Duchess opened a request from one major partner, demanding a revised contract. Every royal title, crest, reference to palace contact, and suggestion of coordination with the king's household had to be removed. A crest was an official emblem linked to royal identity, and its presence had carried authority far beyond decoration. The message made the new reality painfully clear. The Sussex name could remain, but the implied protection of the monarchy could not. Meghan stared at the screen as a global foundation paused the project connected to the disputed ceremony. Irritation turned into disbelief. She closed the laptop sharply and asked Harry whether he had known the decree could reach their commercial work. Harry did not answer. He turned away, still trapped inside the humiliation of losing his broadcast. To him, Charles had silenced a son. To her, the king had dismantled an entire strategy. Meghan accused her husband of underestimating his father and entering the confrontation without a defensive plan. She had believed Charles would hesitate because punishment might make them appear victimized. Instead, the monarch had acted with precision, separating personal speech from royal authority without forbidding Harry from speaking at all. Harry insisted they should release the cancelled address immediately and expose the decree as control. Meghan stopped him. The dukedom, his formal noble title, could be placed at risk if the sealed clause activated. For once, she was the one urging restraint. Their legal advisor confirmed the danger through a documented written opinion. Harry remained free to speak as a private citizen, but he could no longer attach royal authority to those words. The restriction did not remove his voice. It removed the power surrounding it. Meghan then found earlier emails from a trusted professional advisor warning Harry to delete every claim of palace support. He had ignored them. The written record could now destroy any legal challenge. Harry grabbed the original script and tore its first page in half. Regret came instantly. Meghan retrieved the pieces because they might become evidence. That night, Charles called privately and offered one final meeting without lawyers, advisors, William, or Meghan. With every strategy silenced, father and son would finally meet, without the crown standing between them. The most important confrontation did not happen beneath palace chandeliers or before a line of waiting advisors. It happened in a small private room where Charles and Harry sat without titles, being announced, without papers between them, and without anyone present to interrupt the truth. For the first time since the decree was signed, the king did not speak as sovereign, and Harry did not answer as a wounded public figure. They spoke as a father and son who had almost forgotten how. Charles chose Highgrove instead of a formal palace office. The country residence offered privacy, but more importantly, it removed the cold machinery of royal power from the meeting. No private secretary attended. A private secretary was the senior aide who normally managed official business and recorded important decisions. Both men agreed there would be no recording, no legal note, and no public account. Harry entered expecting surrender to be demanded. Instead, his father asked him to sit. The monarch explained that the decree had been written to stop the misuse of royal authority, not to erase their blood relationship. Harry listened without answering, but anger still held his face. Charles poured 2 glasses of water himself. When his son refused his, the king left it untouched and leaned back. "You have spent years asking me to hear your pain," he said. "Today, you must hear my fear." The words changed the room. Charles admitted that every public battle had made him feel he was losing Harry again. Yet love could not force the monarchy to accept promises it had never made. The crown represented official sovereign power, and that power could not be offered through private emotion, family pressure, or public sympathy. Harry finally confessed what the cancelled broadcast had been designed to do. He had intended to corner his father. Once the proposal reached millions of people, he believed Charles would choose reconciliation rather than risk another international storm. The Duke had counted on pressure where trust had already failed. Silence followed. Then Harry acknowledged that promising royal support without consent had crossed a line. He did not apologize for leaving official life, and he refused to call that decision a mistake. But he accepted that family access could not be turned into public authority. Charles offered one narrow path forward. If his son obeyed the decree, removed every royal endorsement claim, and privately corrected the foundation record, the sealed clause would remain inactive. Harry's title would face no further action. The king refused everything else. There would be no restored duties, no private palace briefings, and no hybrid role combining royal privileges with outside independence. Their personal relationship might heal slowly, but the constitutional boundary was permanent. Harry lifted the untouched glass but did not drink. He asked whether his father still considered him part of the family. "Always," Charles replied, "but not as an instrument of the crown." Harry accepted the terms privately. Outside Highgrove, however, the decree had already become a global symbol of punishment, power, and royal survival. By sunrise, the private family crisis had become a worldwide royal earthquake. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rushed out special editions. Commentators argued over whether Charles had defended the crown or punished his own son too severely. Yet one image captured the public mood more powerfully than any studio debate. A silent crowd gathered outside Buckingham Palace, watching as a newspaper bearing Harry's face and the words, "The King's Final Line," was lifted above the gates. Buckingham Palace released a tightly controlled statement confirming that only serving representatives authorized by the sovereign could speak or negotiate in the crown's name. The sovereign was the reigning monarch, whose approval gave official royal authority. Harry was not attacked personally, but the meaning was unmistakable. He remained the king's son, yet he no longer possessed any recognized path to act as the monarchy's informal voice. The Sussex office answered with unexpected restraint. Its written response said Harry would continue his private charitable work while reviewing the decree's effect. Journalists had prepared for anger, accusation, and open defiance. Instead, the silence surrounding the statement created even greater tension. The Duke had threatened resistance, but his first public move looked almost like surrender. A morning newspaper captured the crisis with brutal simplicity. Its black and white front page showed Charles signing the order beneath the headline, "The King's Final Line. Harry may speak, but not for the crown." Outside the palace gates, supporters applauded the decision, while a smaller group held signs accusing the monarchy of abandoning a son. Police separated the two sides as the argument spread across live broadcasts. Charles watched the coverage from a private room. When one commentator described the decree as a father's revenge, the king switched off the television. Camilla saw his face tighten and quietly asked whether the palace should correct that claim. The queen consort understood that public interpretation could harden into history. He refused. Defending himself, the monarch believed, would only turn private pain into another public battle. Meghan watched an American broadcaster describe the decree as the end of the Sussexes' informal royal influence. She did not respond with fury. The Duchess looked stunned by how quickly the media accepted the palace's distinction between Harry the Prince and Harry the Representative. Years of carefully maintained ambiguity had disappeared in a single news cycle. William then authorized officials to confirm one crucial point through a documented palace briefing. Harry remained loved as part of the family, but no reconciliation would restore unauthorized royal power. The prince wanted the public to understand that affection and authority were now permanently separate. Harry made his choice. He ordered his team to withdraw the broadcast and sent a written correction to the International Foundation, admitting he had not possessed the king's approval. The public had delivered its arguments, and the Duke had accepted the boundary. Now Charles had to decide whether the decree would stand as punishment or become the line that finally ended years of confusion. In the end, King Charles did not destroy Harry, and Harry did not bring the monarchy to its knees. The decree accomplished something quieter and more permanent. It separated family love from royal power, forcing both men to accept that blood could preserve a relationship but could not grant unlimited authority. Meghan's stunned reaction, William's painful loyalty, and Charles's final resolve all pointed toward the same verdict. Reconciliation was still possible, but the age of blurred boundaries was over. Harry formally abandoned the televised address and corrected the disputed partnership language in writing. He agreed that future projects would not claim direct backing from his father, his brother, or the royal household. That decision mattered because it ended the strategy of using family closeness as implied institutional support. The Duke kept his voice, but he surrendered the power to make that voice sound official. Charles kept the sealed enforcement clause inactive. The clause was the hidden condition that could have triggered further action against Harry's dukedom, his formal noble title. No parliamentary process began, and no attempt was made to strip him publicly. The king understood that humiliation might protect the crown for one day, while destroying any chance of repairing the family for years. Several days later, Charles received his son's written confirmation. He read it alone, placed it inside the same red box as the decree, and closed the lid without celebration. A red box was the secure case used for confidential royal papers, but this one now carried more than policy. It held the record of a father who had drawn a line against his own child. Relief crossed the monarch's face, followed quickly by grief. Harry remained outside official royal life. He kept his private causes, his personal freedom, and his right to criticize. Yet he could no longer use proximity to the monarchy as leverage. The prince finally understood that independence meant standing on his own name, not borrowing authority from a family he had chosen to leave professionally. Meghan accepted the same reality. Her shock hardened into determination as she began reshaping their future around personal identity rather than palace connection. The Duchess had lost the advantage of royal ambiguity, but she had also been given a clear choice: build something independent or remain trapped by a title that no longer opened official doors. William emerged as the firm defender of the boundary. He had not defeated his brother. The future king had accepted the painful duty of protecting a crown that could not survive if private love overruled public responsibility. Charles made the final meaning clear by leaving the decree in force permanently. He protected Harry from total destruction, but refused to protect him from consequence. The order was never withdrawn because it was not revenge. It became the lasting rule separating royal birth from royal authority. Later, Harry called his father privately. Their words were cautious and imperfect. Neither man mentioned titles, negotiations, or statements. For the first time in years, they spoke without using the monarchy as a shield or a weapon. The decree closed the door on Harry's unofficial influence, but it left one smaller door unlocked: the chance for a father and son to rebuild without asking the crown to carry their pain.